Well, if you want to carry on a business in Australia, and that's the fancy word for run a business, carrying on a business. Well, whether you are a sole trader, which is just by yourself, whether you're a company, whether you are some type of trading trust, be it a discretionary trust or a unit trust, if you want to trade or carry on a business in Australia, you will need an ABN. The ABN stands for Australian Business Number. And we're going to go through a handful of questions that I received from a listener in the This Is Money Facebook group. And she wanted to be kept anonymous because she's on maternity leave and wants to do something on the side and doesn't want to just pick up more hours at her current job. So I like this because how can we use our circumstances to maybe pivot into something else? And that could be your own thing. So I'm going to answer a handful of questions about ABNs, all the stuff that you need to get started. My name's Glen James, and this is business. Rightio, so the first question was, at what point should you set up an ABN? Well, the textbook answer is when you want to start your own business and trade in Australia. It's as simple as that. Now, I will say, when you start your ABN, if you searched on Google, like set up an ABN, like there'll be a heap of different sponsored stuff. You can actually do this yourself, but you've got to make sure you go to the abr.gov.au website, which is the Australian Business Register. And I'm just on the website now. You can click applying for an ABN. It's got heaps of really easy to understand information. And then there's just a button there, applying for an ABN. There's just a big orange button, apply or reapply for an ABN. There's some videos on there, but hey, you wanted me to explain, so I'll give you my 3 cents worth and we'll go from there. So yeah, if you want to start trading legally, you need an ABN. The next question was, are there any fees or ongoing fees for them? Now, that's a good question. There are no fees to register or set up an ABN. There are no ongoing fees. All you're doing is rocking up to the ABR, the Australian Business Register, applying for the ATM, but you have to actually be entitled for an ABN. Now, basically, the entitlement is you want to be running a business in Australia. That's the entitlement. There are a couple of things when you register for your ABN, you'll need to let them know what type of business you're doing. Okay, so you have to actually be wanting to trade when you set up an ABN. I can't just log on tomorrow and be like, oh, I want to set up an ABN, don't know what I want to do yet. I'll just do it and then think about it in the future. And it's a relatively fast process. So I would imagine with your business ideas, get that happening first. Then you can log on and apply for an ABN. So the question following was, do they expire? Now, ABNs do not expire. However, if you stopped trading and in the background, the Australian government, the ATO and the ABR do some cross-referencing, and we'll get into this, we'll just use the example of a sole trader. So it's yourself, and I'll use me as an example. Glen James, I'm a wall and floor tiler, and I've got an ABN for that. Now, when I do my tax return, because I'm a sole trader, it will have my tax file number on my tax return and my ABN. When you set up your ABN, you'll need your tax file number and details of the entity, but if it's a sole trader, it's just yourself. So if there is a period of time where you're doing your tax returns and your tax file stays with you, your tax file number stays with you until you basically check out of this planet. If there's a handful of years where the tax return is done and they don't see the ABN and they do a bit of a matching thing and they're like, okay, well, this person actually hasn't traded with this ABN, they may ditch the ABN. I actually have had that happen to me personally along my business journey, because when I started my first business, I set up as a sole trader and then moved to a different structure, and we'll get to that. So yeah, they don't expire. It's a one and done for that entity. There was another question here. By setting up an ABN, does that mean you need to forevermore submit a quarterly BAS? And what if you stop earning money from it? Okay, so a couple of things. I'll answer the second part first. If you stop earning money from your sole trading activities, you won't be putting that ABN on your tax return, and it might just be your employment income, right? And that will just wither away in the background. So that's not an issue. In terms of the BAS, and that stands for Business Activity Statement, you will have to do a BAS only if you register for GST. GST in Australia is 10%. You only have to register for GST if your annual turnover is $75,000 per year or more, and that will happen quarterly. Now, a couple of things with the BAS. If I'm the wall and floor tiler and I'm doing it weekends and I've got my ABN under Glen James. So when I issue that invoice, okay, I've got to issue an invoice to the person I've just tiled their floor for. It will say to customer, their name and details. And then somewhere on the letterhead, it might say Glen James, ABN, and my postal address. Because it's just the ABN is attached to me as the sole trader. Now, if you are registered for GST, you have to collect GST. Now, if the tiling job that I did, and I'm doing it on the weekends, and I charge $1,000 for that job, the invoice would just be like floor tiling, including tiles, amount due $1,000. If I was registered for GST and I'm starting to earn more, we have to add 10% to that, or you'll be paying the 10% from the $1,000, if that makes sense. And it's a really simple way to work that out, right? If you get your calculator and you did $1,000, and this is like, I just want to keep my price as $1,000, $1,000 divided by 11 equals 90.91. So that is a way to work out how much the GST will be. We won't get into that, but generally speaking, if you clicked over or you'll project it in this quarter to annualize over 75 grand a year, you'd have your accountant register you for GST, and you'll likely do your invoice tiling $1,000 plus GST of $100, total due $1,100, okay? But in the first instance, you know, if you're doing something on the side, you know, 1 day a week or something like that, you likely won't get over that 75K, particularly in this instance if someone just wants to try and start their own business, okay? Now, the next question, at what point should you get advice from an accountant? Well, I honestly think the best practice thing to do would be from day one. Chat with your accountant and say, look, I'm looking at doing this. Is there anything I need to know? Because they might say, well, you're about to do this activity here and it's really high risk, even though it's 1 day a week, you probably should look at using this structure for these reasons. And I'll give you an example. A lot of these companies, like the building industry, right? They will say as their rule, if you come on site and you're a wall and floor tiler for insert XYZ builder, they will only contract to companies or entities. And the reason so is because if they're contracting sole traders, there can be this weird thing where they are liable for workers' compensation for you, and in some weird instances in some industries, superannuation, right? So it is best to chat with your accountant, but if I'm on maternity leave and I don't know, I love making leather wallets, you know, a couple of days a week, and I'm just selling them online, you would just likely do your own name, right? So there is a carve out. Sure, have a quick chat with your accountant, but if you're really stuck and you're thinking, oh, I'll just get an ABN myself and hit the road, that's sweet. But I would say for maybe your first tax return, it might be worth paying a few $100s to an accountant. And remember, the fees that you pay an accountant for your tax return is tax deductible in the next financial year. So I'm a big fan of getting advice, but in the first instance, you probably can set an ABN up yourself. Okay, couple of questions to go. This is fun. Can you just do your name or get a business name? Now, what I wanted to say there, back to the invoice example, I set up an ABN for Glen James Wall and Floor Tiling, Glen James ABN, okay, and then my details. You can actually go to the ASIC website and register for a business name, and that will cost you, I think it's like, I've literally just done it for This Is Money, and I'll tell you why in a second. I think it was like $99 for 3 years. So you go to ASIC, who regulate companies effectively in Australia. ASIC stands for Australian Securities and Investment Commission, and you can set up a business name. So I can log on to ASIC and say, I want to register the business name Fancy Tiles, okay? And that is linked, the details of that, when people look up that business name, they will see, like, because if you just did a business name search online through the ASIC website, it will show you that Fancy Tiles is registered to this ABN. Now, if I register Fancy Tiles as a business name, what I then do is, when I do my invoice, it may now have a logo up the top, or I've got a website and it's got the logo, Fancy Tiles, all that stuff. In the fine print on that website, it might say Glen James trading as Fancy Tiles, then my ABN. Now, you can do this if you go to thisis.money. So I'll do that live. Thisis.money, our website, and you scroll down to the very bottom, you will see in the fine print, it says Simo Interactive, which is my entity, our company. It says trading as This Is Money. Okay, so I've registered the business name This Is Money on the ASIC website, and I'm trading as that. So on the website, so it's basically abr.business.gov.au, and you can do an ABN name search. So with ABNs, it's all publicly available information. I can literally search This Is Money. It comes up, the top of the list, the name, This Is Money, type, business name, location, 2300 New South Wales, here in Newcastle. And it's got my ABN there. So I click that there. And then on the website, it says the actual entity name is Simo Interactive Proprietary Limited. So that's a long and boring story, but when we did the rebrand, we just wanted to remove the words Simo Interactive from any customer or listener or watcher's point of view. So they'll only kind of see now, This Is Money. It was just too confusing. And then it says when the ABN was active from, what the entity type is, and it says it's an Australian private company. And it says that I am registered for goods and service tax, and the main business location, which is the postcode and state. And then under that, it says business names, This Is Money. And then under that, it's got the company number. So all that to say, you can have a business name, and that's totally fine. If you are just doing something incidental on the side and it doesn't really matter, you can just use your own name. Now, all this stuff you've got to remember is when you're a sole trader and you've got your ABN, it's inherently linked to your tax file number. That ABN is linked to your tax file number. And right after this, we'll talk about different structures and if we need a new ABN. I'll be back right after this. Okay, I'm back. Now, if you want dedicated business type content, this episode does go up on This Is Money podcast as a Saturday episode, but we'll also put it up on the This Is Business podcast, which is just a dedicated podcast just for the business topic. So if someone's like, oh, hey, I want to start a business. Is there any business content? We just send it to that feed and it's got there. So this is business if you want to have a subscribe there if you're not already. So what happens if you change structures or names? Okay, a couple of things. If you, for example, we'll use me as the example again. When I started my business, I wanted it easy. I wanted it low cost. Wanted to just make sure could happen. So it was in my own name, sole trader. So the ABN was linked to me personally. And it used to start with a 97, my ABN. I remember that. And then as time went on, with the advice from accountants and solicitors, it was like, hey, we need to have some more future plans. This is happening. We need to change entities and set up a formal structure. So I ended up setting up in my financial advice business a company that was, well, it was actually a unit trust, but we'll just keep it simple, a different entity in its own right, okay? Because a company or a trading trust is a completely separate taxable entity, it will have its own ABN, but also it will have its own tax file number. So if you're like, oh, I'm doing these leather wallets on the side and business is booming, I need to start a company because I want to start employing people. I want to formalize this. There's some other things that the accountant said that it's good to have a company. So you can have your accountant create a company. The company will have a company number. And generally speaking, the company number, so for example, Simo Interactive, my company, proprietary limited, that is, the ABN starts with 31, and then the other 9 digits are actually the company number. Because you can create a company that might just hold some intellectual property. For example, like, oh, I've got this recipe book and I just want the company to hold the rights to that. It doesn't trade, it's just a structure thing. And I don't need to register it for tax. I don't need a TFN and I don't need to trade out of it. So I'm just going to set up a company and not worry about an ABN because it's not trading. But going back to what I did, when you set up a company, it will have its own TFN and its own ABN and a company number, right? So then what you need to do, because it's its own entity, this kind of leads into the whole bank situation. If you're a sole trader in your own name, you can just use your own bank account because it all goes back to your own tax file number and your own tax return. But if I grow the business and start a company, I've got my company name. It could be, the company name could be, what was I saying before? Stylish Tiles or something, Awesome Tiles, whatever that is. You might set up a company called Awesome Tiles Proprietary Limited. You then can effectively log into ASIC and move the name that was linked to your ABN, the trading name, Awesome Tiles, I totally forget what it was, and transfer that company name or the trading name over to be owned by the company and not you. And this is why it does get a bit complex if this is your first rodeo. That's why it's important to start first. But all this to say, it is possible to grow your business, set up a company, but you will need to set up a new entity, and that entity will need its new and own ABN and also its own bank account. So you go into the bank, now you've got to get a business bank account. You can't just rock up and do an online bank account in your name because they're like, who owns this bank account? When you're a sole trader and it's your own name and you've got your own ABN on your own tax return, well, it's just in your name. It's just a big funnel, all goes down to your tax file number. You set up a company or another entity, the bank will want to know, well, who owns this company? And like, well, the company does. And the bank will say, well, who owns this bank account? Well, the company does. All right, well, we need the company details to register the bank account in the name of the company. So it's totally easy to change structures, but you've just got to know it's a new ABN, a new TFN, and your old ABN, that will just fizzle away in the background. I'm sure your accountant could log in and cancel it. And one of the reasons I use an accountant, and we're all at different business journeys, I've just recently moved to a new place, right? And when you have a company, you've got a duty to update the details of the directors, like literal home address, director's home address. And you've got to be careful. Someone can do a company search online and pay for a company search and see where directors actually live. So if someone wanted to snoop around and pay money and find out where I actually live, it's possible, right? Like, this is just crazy. So me paying my accountant each year, I got a notice, got to update the company. I just said to the accountant, hey, can you log in and update my address as a director? Now, the thing is, with the BAS portal, once you're over 75 grand, and with the ASIC company details and all that stuff, you can actually have a tax agent be linked to that stuff, and they can just log in at their end and tweak it on your behalf. So there are so many good benefits to having an accountant in your corner. Okay, we've answered, can you just do your own name or get a business name? Yep. Oh, and there was just another question there. Can you have multiple trading names? Yes, you could. You could literally set up a trading name, Glen's Awesome Tiles, linked to the Sole Trader ABN through the ASIC website. Then you'd be like, oh, Glen's Awesome Tiles or whatever, that's my boutique-y brand. It's high cost, high touch, blah, blah, blah. You could then log into the ASIC business register and set up Glen's low-cost floor tiling, linked back to my own personal Sole Trader and ABN. So when I go out and work at a job and I have the invoice for this Glen's Awesome Tiles, the luxury stuff, the invoice for that says, and the logo, Glen's Luxury Tiles, and then in the fine print it says, Glen James, trading as Glen's Luxury Tiles, ABN, postal address. And then if I go out and do a job for the low-cost side of the business, the logo is low-cost tiling. Then it says in the fine print, Glen James, trading as low-cost tiles, postal address. And this kind of gets in, well, in the back end for you, all roads might lead to Rome, and it's the same account and all that. But yeah, you can effectively have a multiple business names attached to an ABN trading as. And then, yeah, do you have to come up with a cool business name? No, you can use your own name. Just want to sell leather wallets online, or I just want to tile. Hey, it's Glen James, ABN. I did your floor tiling. What costs do you need to keep in mind if you are only planning on starting small? Well, realistically, you've got to just keep in mind the costs of your own setup costs. So that could be, if you wanted to do a registration name, it's going to be, I think, $99 or $89. It's $100 for 3 years. I think there's a 2-year option. I forget. It's actually quite incidental to register that. And then the other costs would be your annual accounting fees. If you're serious enough to want to trade, start a business and make money, like that's the only reason you do a business, right? To start to make money on your own terms. And we know the keys and the principles of small business is this. We provide a product or service to someone at a cost higher than what it costs us to deliver. If I'm selling glassware, I paid 20 cents for this glass, I put it on the shelf for $4. And that spread there, I've got to pay some rent, website costs, accounting costs, salary and wages, and then that profit is what I keep. So if I want to start and do my own thing, if it isn't a hobby, you want to make it something, well, let's get some advice, let's lean into it, let's put energy behind it. But realistically, there are no major costs when starting small. You might want to set a website up, you might want to set a social media account up, you might want to get Canva to do some design. I mean, and that's relatively low cost, right? So if you're just starting small, and there's nothing wrong with starting small. I sold a business for quite a lot of money, and I started as a sole trader and then kind of moved entities and whatnot. And so do not stress out about starting small. Do not stress out if you are making leather wallets at home and you don't even pay for a $99 business name. Start small. It's totally all right. You will have to keep records though, and that could be when you are starting small, as simple as a spreadsheet. Okay, I spent $200 on buying raw leather or whatever. I spent $100 on, I don't even know, needles and cotton and scissors. Yep, track them. That was my cost of goods because I can keep a record of that and claim them as an expense on tax. And then I sold 5 items at $100, so my sale was $500, so I have to keep these records, right? And that's why if you keep your records good, your accounting costs will be lower rather than just emailing your accountant 20 different pages or 100 different receipts, because they've just got to collect it and collate it and charge you their rates rather than you keeping records as we go. Accounting fees, tax, etc. So basically, yeah, the cost of starting small. How long's a piece of string? Well, double its half, but it can be relatively small. Now, the last question here, doing up invoices, etc. Are there easy programs to do this that won't eat into my profits? The answer is yes. Now, what I would suggest is either set up your own dedicated bank account, even if it's a sole trader in your own name, so that bank account, it only has income from sales that goes in and costs of goods that goes out. That's all. Then the only other thing that might come out of there would be an allocation for your own tax and an allocation of profit for you to live off. And we'll use a simple example. We've sold $1,000 worth of stock, for example. But we'd already had the leather wallets and that, so $1,000 lumped in our bank account. It's probably a good best practice to start from day one to set up a second savings account, and every dollar that goes into that account, just carve off maybe 25, 30%, maybe 20% around that, because you've got to keep your own records. And if you're working 2 days a week and then you're selling stuff 1 day a week, the work produces an income. The profit from your business, which is the sale of goods less the cost of goods equals your profit, that will land on your income tax return. And in the first year, the ATO will turn around and say, hey, you earned $30,000 or $10,000 or $20,000 from your ABN. You now owe us money for tax. Then what will happen, the next quarter that comes around, the ATO will say, hey, we think that you, because you are running a business, we want you to start paying some tax to us each quarter. So they might say, you paid us $4,000 of tax from the first year of trading. So we're probably just going to say to us, so we're probably going to say to you each quarter for your self-employed small business, you need to just pay $1,000 in tax. Okay, so it's an installment. And then what happens at the end of the year, so the end of the second year, we're doing some work at our 2 days a week job. We're selling goods less the cost of goods equals profit. That profit goes on your income tax return with your employment income. And they say, well, your work withheld $5,000 of tax from your income. You've already withheld throughout the year $4,000 of tax that we've taken from you each quarter. So you don't owe us anything. You're all good. Or it's like, well, you did a little bit better, so you owe us $1,000. Or you didn't do as much as what you did last year, and we took $1,000 a quarter from the small business, so we'll give you $500 back. So that's kind of how it works. But all that to say, the bookkeeping and the bank account thing, it's really important. Doing up draft invoices, are there programs that do this that won't eat into my profits? Look, there are. Xero is a big program that you can use. I think there's QuickBooks, there's Miles. That stuff is a bit expensive. My graphic designer uses one called Bonsai. There's Papera, which is an all-in-one bank account system, which is cool. We've done an episode with them on the main show. But I think in the first year, you could honestly set up a Word document template on your invoice stuff. Your name, your ABN, your address, their name, ABN, the address, what you provided, where they can pay you. Can be a Word document template. You might just set a template up, invoice number 001, done. Doesn't have to be special. But as you start to grow in your business, you will soon find that, I was doing these invoices myself. It's too annoying now. I'm starting to earn money. All right, I'm then going to set up a formal accounting system. But yeah, like I know some people that invoice me for the odd thing, and they do the invoices themselves through a Word document template, and also just email it as a PDF. Do that. But yeah, you don't have to overcook that. But yeah, there you have it. Now, I want you to remember, if you do things right from the start, it makes things easier as time goes on. So if you get your record keeping nailed at the start, you get your banking structure nailed at the start, you get your invoicing done from the start. Okay, and just finally, the trademark thing. Look, I'm not too concerned about that if you're just doing something small on the side. We've trademarked the words, this is money, this is property, because, all our stuff. Because we're a national consumer-facing brand, we want certainty. We want to make sure, because we've invested so much effort and money and time into the market, we don't want someone else to come along and start to trade using the name that we've used. Before we moved to This Is Money, we had My Millennial Money trademarked. Okay, so it is worth doing, but I wouldn't run to do it in the first year. It is getting a lot harder to do trademarks. For example, our podcast, Financially Fierce, they rejected the trademark application for the words financially fierce. Wild, I know, but I just registered the business name, Financially Fierce. So that's kind of, it is a whole other long, annoying thing with trademarks. But yeah, I would just honestly focus on getting your ABN, getting your website. If you get a .com.au website, you will need an ABN, and you'll need to prove that you are doing it. And there could be some other questions when you're doing your ABN to prove that, that ABN, I'm getting it, I'm a wall and floor tiler, this is for this. So yeah, you've got to be legitimate. But yeah, just get out there. If you need any help, throw a post up in the Facebook group. There's lots of people who have been down this road and will be able to continue the conversation. My name's Glen James. Thanks for listening today. If you found this useful, please send it to someone who you know that wants to start a business. And the first thing we need to do is have a bit of thought about when we need an ABN and go from there. I'll see you soon.